Viridian, the Green Guide, written by Clouds, read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 57, Friendship, Part 2. Inko held her breath as she tiptoed back into Izuku's room and put his phone back on his pillow. Sure, the shower was still on, so it was very unlikely she'd get caught, but still, it was better safe than sorry. Whatever funk Izuku had been in for the past few days hadn't let up yet, and Inko knew that she just needed to be patient and let it pass, but she just felt so helpless. It was like when Izuku was diagnosed all over again. He'd just barricaded himself in his room and wouldn't tell her how she could help. She hadn't meant to invade his privacy. She hadn't. It was just that when she decided to grab his laundry when he got in the shower, his phone had started vibrating. It was obviously a phone call, so she checked the caller ID so she could tell Izuku when he got out. That was it. That was all she was going to do. But then the phone had stopped vibrating and the screen had lit up with the missed call notification. Denki Kaminari, 3 missed calls. Izuku didn't have many friends. Inko knew that. With what had happened at that school, it was a wonder he'd found the courage to make friends with Kaminari at all. But had something happened between them? Even if it hadn't, maybe Kaminari would know why Izuku was so upset. Inko would even take him just being there for Izuku at the moment, so that he didn't have to feel so alone. So she may have borrowed Kaminari's contact information. What Izuku didn't know wouldn't hurt him, right? And she could always apologize later. But Inko didn't know what else to do, and it couldn't be healthy for Izuku to completely isolate himself from his friends like that. She forced her guilt down under a layer of determination as she shakily typed out the number in her own phone now that she was safely back in the kitchen. The phone rang quite a few times before someone picked up. Hello? Inko winced. Was there a non-awkward way to introduce yourself to your depressed son's best friend? Is this Kaminari? If you're calling about my car's extended warranty, I have bad news for you. The boy said seriously, I can't drive. Inko snorted before she could help herself, shocked that Kaminari's sense of humor was every bit as bad as Izuku had warned about. When she finally managed to stop laughing after a few seconds, she gasped, Sorry, I didn't get the chance to introduce myself. I'm Inko Midoriya, Izuku's mother, and I am definitely not calling to ask about your car's extended warranty. Oh! There was a scramble on the other end of the phone, and Inko winced as something crashed. Ow! Sorry, I could have sworn you were a spam call, so I was just trying to, kind of spam you back. It was just supposed to be a joke, but you're not that I thought you were a joke, just a robocaller. But, are you okay? Inko asked, holding back a giggle before forcefully reminding herself that her son's friend might be hurt. Did you fall? No. My homework might need to be reorganized, but, I'm good. Kaminari laughed hesitantly. What about Izuku? Is he okay? I haven't heard from him, and he's kind of been ignoring my texts, which is fine. I'm really not trying to be clingy. Not that talking to my friend's mom is really helping my case, but I'm just worried because I didn't know if something had happened to him. Inko sighed. I was really hoping you could tell me. Izuku, he hasn't been himself for a few days now. I've been trying to cheer him up, but haven't had any luck. Did you two get in a fight or something? Not that I know of, Kaminari said slowly, but, I think, I might know why he's been so, not a friend, but someone we know. She got caught up in a villain attack, and she didn't make it. Inko gasped. That poor girl! Of course that explained Izuku's behavior. He was grieving. Why was he trying to go through it alone? I know I was pretty shocked when I heard the news, Kaminari continued, which is why I was trying to reach out to Izuku to make sure he was safe and taking the news well, but, that obviously didn't work. Iko heard the water turn off and panicked. She needed to wrap this up. Would you like to come over for dinner? I just feel better if, well, neither of you should have to be alone right now. Sure, Kaminari answered. I mean, if Izuku is okay with it, I kind of get the feeling he's avoiding me right now. I think he's avoiding everyone right now, Inko said sadly, which is all the more reason he should have a friend, right? Even if Izuku retreats into his room, I'll at least get to meet you, right? Yeah! Kaminari practically yelled, but he sounded cheerful, so Inko was going to count that as a win. I'll see you later. Good. Inko smiled. I'll text you the address. See you soon. She hung up right as she heard the bathroom door open, and she set the phone down as innocently as she could and started cooking, despite the fact that she knew Izuku couldn't see her and wasn't even paying attention. She had a lot of work to do. Why are you doing so much for me? Katsuki accused. I'm just a little jerk who showed up at your stupid reform group one time. Why are you doing this? Currently, he and Ogawa were sitting on a wall overlooking one of the cleaner areas of the beach. Akiko had had work, a legal job this time, she assured them, and Maki was on a date with his girlfriend. So Ogawa had insisted on getting ice cream and sending pics to the others just to rub it in their faces. The two of them had, of course, sent appropriately enraged responses and promises to get pizza the next time they were gone, which had made Ogawa and Katsuki laugh their asses off. Overall, it was a good day, which didn't do anything to make Katsuki feel better. He didn't deserve any of this. Ogawa licked at his ice cream thoughtfully for a moment before humming, well, I mean, you were there. Ha ha, very funny. Katsuki deadpanned. No, I'm being serious. Ogawa swung around to look at him seriously. You were there. You went to the reform group by choice, not because anybody forced you to. Akiko, Maki, hell, even me. We had to get a kick in the butt and faced with prison to even show up, and yet there you were, showing up every week just because you knew you wanted to change. Do you know how rare that is? It's not that frickin' special, Katsuki grumbled. If it's your damn fault, it's your frickin' responsibility to fix it. You see? That. Ogawa laughed. That's what I'm talking about. Most people try to blame everything else, but not you. You take responsibility for the crap you've done and are trying to be better. I guess we just wanted to be a part of that, you know? Make sure you don't end up messed up like we did. Katsuki rolled his eyes. You're not that messed up. Yeah, we are. Ogawa's grin faded and he looked out over the beach. Look, my life was never easy. Dad had 8 arms, and Mom's quirk lets her change her hair and skin to match a bunch of different animals. But neither of them ever looked exactly human, you know? So we ended up on the wrong side of society before I was even born. It's hard to get jobs with mutation quirks. Ogawa sighed, ignoring the way that melted ice cream was starting to run down his hand. And then it just somehow got worse when my sister and I were born. It wasn't like we could just inherit one of our parents' quirks. No, that would be too easy. Instead, our hair took on characteristics of animals that happened to have 8 limbs. Ogawa gestured toward the tentacles on his head. I got a gross octopus, and I was the lucky one. My sister? Imagine having spider silk for hair. Katsuki thought about that for a moment. He thought his quirk put him in a box, but having a quirk associated with octopi and spiders? If kids were being nice, they'd call quirks like that gross. But most kids would straight up think they were scary, and if the kids were bullies, it wouldn't take that much of a mental leap to go from gross and scary to villain's quirk. Just like that purple-haired kid Katsuki had saved from a beatdown that one time. Katsuki took a bite out of his own ice cream. That sucks. Ogawa gave an amused huff. batting away a bee that was trying to eat the melted ice cream off his hand. Yeah, you're telling me. Arakane got the brunt of it, obviously. Kids on the playground would always run, saying that if they played with her, she'd summon spiders on them. She tried telling them that her quirk didn't work like that, but they obviously didn't listen. Katsuki finished. He remembered so many times that Izuku would try to make a new friend from another class or something, only for their classmates to warn them away because obviously Izuku would steal their quirks since he didn't have one of his own. Why were kids so messed up? The friends she did make were outcasts too, Ogoa scowled, and delinquents. It didn't take long before smoking behind the gym moved into shoplifting and petty theft, and before long, I got dragged into it too. It wasn't like I had a whole lot of other options, right? It was either hang out with Arakane and her friends, or try to get along with kids my own age, and what middle schooler wants to hang out with the sea witch? When he sighed again, he sounded frustrated, but tired too. Maki and Akiko have similar stories. I know Akiko shared some of hers before. The point is, we're all kind of messed up. And then in walks this kid, obviously lost, who isn't afraid to get his hands dirty? Ogoa shrugged. It's like the golden opportunity we never got growing up. And then we learned you were a bully, and it's like a giant screw you to all the kids that used to bully us, you know? Huh. Katsuki didn't really know how to respond to that. So it's not that you think I'm special or something. I was just willing to put in the work. Pretty much. Ogoa shrugged and threw the rest of his forgotten ice cream in with the rest of the trash at the beach. But hey, don't let it get you down. We still like you. Yeah, right. Like I even care. Katsuki griped. Let's get going. The old hag wants me home in time for dinner. Izuku was lured from his room by the smell of his mom's cooking. He didn't necessarily want to eat. He was still worried about how he was going to be a vigilante now that the heroes were actually going to try to catch him. But he was hungry enough to make up for that, especially once he remembered that he really hadn't eaten since the day before. He pulled at the hem of his Eraserhead hoodie, hoping it wasn't too wrinkled, but decided that Mom probably didn't care, considering she seemed to like the hoodie for some reason. Mom? What's for dinner? It smells really... Izuku froze. Good. Denki was sitting at the table. Why was Denki sitting at the table? Was he angry with him? Had he somehow figured out that it was Izuku's fault that Kohaku was dead, and that he was here to tell him that they weren't friends anymore? How was Izuku supposed to deal with losing his hero friends and his civilian friends on the same day? It wasn't fair. Hey, Sleeping Beauty! Denki grinned, bouncing over to him and pulling on his arm to lead him to the table. Your mom invited me over for dinner. She's the best. Mom? Izuku looked between her and Denki in confusion. You invited him? How did you even get his number? That's not important, Mom said hurriedly. What's important is that dinner's ready and I made enough for 2 growing boys. So you both better eat up. Do you hear me? Sure thing, Midoriya-san. Okay. Izuku didn't speak much as they ate, mostly letting Denki and Mom get to know each other. They got along well, which would be great if Izuku was sure that Kaminari wasn't here to abandon him. He didn't seem mad, which probably just meant that he didn't know, which wasn't that better? At least it meant that Izuku wasn't going to lose his only friend. Not that he was sure he deserved a friend, but he couldn't just tell Denki everything, even though it felt like a betrayal, and he hated the fact that he had to trick his friend into liking him. Admitting that he was at least partially at fault for Kohaku's death would mean coming clean about everything, including his vigilantism, and he just couldn't put Denki in danger like that. Maybe once he got into UA and was actually on his way to becoming a hero, but even with how much they'd trained Denki's quirk and his combat skills, he was still a civilian, and he hadn't signed up for whatever powerful enemies Izuku had somehow attracted by sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Izuku could live with lying to his friend if it meant that no one else got hurt. Or maybe Denki just didn't want to end their friendship in front of his mom. Soon enough, dinner was Soon enough, dinner was over, and Izuku started gathering up everyone's dishes, if only to have something to do so he didn't have to talk. Denki would probably be leaving soon, which meant that Izuku would finally be able to retreat back into his room and stop trying to hide how guilty he felt. "Oh, Izuku, don't worry about the dishes. I'll do them," Mom said, grabbing the stack of plates from him before he had a chance to protest. "Why don't you show Kaminari your room, since it's his first time here?" "Yeah, man." Denki grinned and gave him a thumbs up. "I mean, you've already seen mine." Izuku tried to calm his breathing as he looked between them and nodded slowly. "Okay." Izuku couldn't stop his mind from racing as he led Denki down the hall. This was it. Denki was probably too polite to end their friendship in front of his mom, so this was just a ploy to get him alone, and once they were in the privacy of his room, Denki would drop the bomb. Izuku shut the door behind them and braced himself for the inevitable. It never came. "Whoa, you've got so many different heroes in here." Denki's smile didn't fade at all as his eyes roamed over the posters and figurines filling Izuku's room. "I mean, don't most people keep to All Might in the top 10? Izuku shrugged hesitantly. Yeah, I guess. I used to have a lot more All Might in here, but I wanted to give space to some of the underappreciated heroes. Yeah, because All Might can't be everywhere, and a lot of the heroes do a lot of work to keep everyone safe, even if they're not really in the rankings." "Cool." Kaminari looked at one of the posters that Izuku had behind his bed. "Amplifier? I think I heard of her once. She's that announcer hero, right?" Izuku nodded frantically. "That's how most people know about her, because she volunteers at a lot of hero events because of her quirk. But she's actually a really effective nighttime hero. She stops a lot of crimes near the bar district and keeps everyone safe." Denki gestured to Izuku's hoodie. "And Eraserhead? Is he a hero too?" Izuku's smile faded slightly. Yeah, he's one of my favorites." And yet Izuku had disappointed him. Again. Eraserhead had looked so hopeful when he'd brought up that vigilante rehabilitation program, and Izuku had hated that he'd had to crush that. But then again, he wouldn't have even made the offer if he'd known that Izuku was quirkless. So he didn't feel too guilty. At least, not about that. There was a beat of silence as Denki continued looking at his collection, and Izuku took a deep breath before hesitating. He knew he couldn't tell Denki about the whole vigilante side of things, but was it weird to just not bring it up? Like, it was kind of a big thing, so it was weird that it hadn't come up yet. "Okay, I am so sorry, but the elephant in the room is killing me," Denki said suddenly. "So, like, how are you holding up? I mean, I know it kind of came out of nowhere, and I'm sure you saw it on the news because your mom said you hadn't really been yourself and stuff, you know? I'm sorry. Maybe you're upset for some other reason because I know you didn't know her very well, but then you weren't answering any of my texts, and I hadn't known if something happened to you, too." Izuku curled in on himself. "I didn't want to make you worry." Denki ran a hand through his hair and laughed sadly. "Yeah, sorry, I guess I don't deal well with people disappearing on me, you know? It's a kind of an ADHD thing. I know you probably don't, but when you kept ignoring my calls, my brain just kept looping that you hated me for some reason. I know it probably sounds really mean, but I was almost relieved when your mom called and said you were just depressed. I'm sorry, that sounds really selfish. Just forget I said that. Maybe I should start over. I'm sorry." Izuku tugged at the sleeves of his hoodie again. "I didn't want to. I didn't mean. I knew how close you were to her, and Before he could give anything even resembling a good explanation, Izuku found himself pulled into a tight hug. "I just didn't want to lose you too." Izuku felt terrible. He hadn't meant to make Denki think he hated him. In fact, he'd been too busy being convinced that Denki would hate him to even consider that he might be worrying about the same thing. He swallowed and leaned back slightly, putting his hands on Denki's shoulders so they were looking eye to eye. I'm not going to leave you, Izuku promised. Denki, you're probably the only friend I've really had. I mean, I know you're the only friend I've had since I was diagnosed quirkless. I don't want to lose you either. And he meant it. He still wasn't convinced that the world wouldn't be better if he'd just taken a swan dive all those months ago. But if he had, he would have missed out on a wonderful friendship with Denki, who might still be trying to fry his brain as he figured out the best uses for his electricity. He couldn't abandon the only person except for his mom who had stayed by him even after learning he was quirkless. He had to stay alive. I'm not going to leave you, Izuku muttered, pulling Kaminari back into the hug as they both started crying. I'm not going to leave you, I promise. Ogawa waved to Bakugo cheerfully as he got on the train and laughed as Bakugo predictably flipped him off in return. The kid was going to be a great hero someday. Honestly, he hadn't been sure at the beginning if Bakugo would be able to pull it off, but the kid seemed to attack every obstacle in his way like it was an enemy that he could kill, and he was fighting for his life. It was refreshing. The sun was already setting as Ogawa made his own way home. His sister was probably out doing God only knew what, so he was looking forward to a nice TV dinner and maybe some TV before bed. Maybe he should look for some jobs tomorrow. The redemption course was almost over, so it wouldn't hurt to know what was available for when his record finally got wiped. It'd give him a head start at least, and he needed all the advantages he could get if he wanted to keep up with Bakugo. He felt a weird tingle down his spine as he walked down one of the near-deserted streets leading away from the train station. It almost felt like he was being watched. Had Bakugo decided to get off the train and follow him? It seemed unlikely, but maybe their dumb little pranks were finally rubbing off on him. He was almost proud. Nice try, Kachan! Ogawa laughed forcibly. Come on out where I can see you! Instead of a groan or swearing like he'd expected, though, there was just a chip bag fluttering in the wind and a few strangers looking at him like he was crazy. Ogawa blushed and put his head down as he hurried down the street. He could have sworn someone was following him, and Bakugo was the only likely culprit. But maybe he was just being paranoid. It was dark, but he was used to being out after dark, so it shouldn't be giving him this feeling. Ogawa shook his head and subconsciously picked up his pace. It was probably nothing. These streets could be a little creepy at night, but it was nothing to worry about, right? He shook his head and tried to ignore the weird feeling, but kept an eye out for anything suspicious. He couldn't see anyone following him, which was one more point for him being just paranoid. He took a deep breath and shook his head again. Maybe the feeling would go away once he got close enough to his home and the streets got more familiar. It didn't. The last leg of his journey home would take him through a dimly lit alley, but Ogawa still felt like he was being watched. He tried to tell himself that he was being ridiculous. He had walked through that alley a million times. He'd even slept there a couple times when Arakane was being a bitch and locked him out. There was nothing to be scared of. That didn't stop him from taking a small knife from his pocket and gripping it tensely. Better safe than sorry, right? He had just barely turned into the alley when he heard it, and it shocked him so much that he almost stopped in his tracks. If anything, he'd been expecting footsteps, not buzzing. He kept walking, a little more quickly this time, but the buzzing just got louder. The faster he walked, the louder it got until he was running. He didn't care what he looked like at this point. His nerves were frayed, and he was just ready to get home and lock the door. He put on a last burst of speed as the exit to the alley came into view, only to skid to a stop as his path was blocked by a large swarm of... Were those bees? Ogawa almost fell onto his butt, but managed to keep his balance and started running in the opposite way before stopping. What had gotten into him? It wasn't as if he was allergic to bees or anything, so he should be able to just go around them. Don't bother them, they won't bother you, right? He took a breath and stared down the swarm, but paused as he was struck by the weirdest sense of deja vu. The whole situation felt eerily familiar, right down to the bees that seemed to be just too strange to be natural. Had had he been here before? He took one step forward, and it was as if a rubber band had snapped. The swarm lunged forward, and Ogawa swatted at the air as he ran, knife useless when his targets were even smaller than his blade. He just needed to get home. He wasn't allergic to bees. He might get a few stings, but he could do this. He just needed to get home. The stings weren't as painful as he expected. If anything, they felt more like needle pricks than bee stings, and he smiled as he realized this was going to be easier than he'd thought. Until the world started spinning. He kept going, only focused on getting out of that damn alley, hardly registering when he tripped and started crawling instead. He just needed to get home. The last thing Ogawa saw before he passed out was the swarm coagulating into the form of a person crouching beside him. Then everything went dark. End of chapter.